Welcome to Chapel Grove Church Podcast, the Bible-centered show that focuses on searching the scriptures to find answers to common spiritual questions. To learn more, go to chapelgrovechurch.com. Now to the show. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Chapel Grove Church Podcast. I'm your host today, Chance Dyer, and I hope you're as excited to listen to today's episode as I was to record it. Today, we're going to talk about Romans 8:28, staying with the theme that we've been on here lately of misquoted Bible verses. You've probably heard it before, and we know that all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. It's a comforting verse, right? People often use it like a guarantee that everything will turn out fine. Lost your job? Don't worry, God will give you a better one. Going through a tough time? Everything happens for a reason. But is that really what Paul meant? Let's take a closer look at how this verse is often misused, what it really means in the context, and why understanding it correctly can strengthen our faith rather than weaken it. So, one of the biggest mistakes with how Romans 8:28 is used is that people turn it into a promise of immediate earthly comfort. It's often quoted as if it means that any hardship or suffering will soon be replaced by something better in a way that makes sense to us. Let's look at a few ways the verse is taken out of context. Number one, the everything will work out perfectly misinterpretation. People sometimes believe this verse means that if they experience a setback, something even better is just around the corner. For example, a person loses their job and someone tells them, "Don't worry, this just means God is preparing you for an even better job." A relationship ends and they hear, "That just means God has someone even better for you." Now, while it's true that God can bring blessings out of difficulties, this isn't a guarantee that our earthly circumstances will improve the way we want them to. Sometimes things don't get better, quote unquote, in a worldly sense. Some people lose a job and remain unemployed for a long time. Some people face illnesses that don't go away. If we misunderstood this verse, we might end up questioning God's goodness when things don't improve. Secondly, the everything happens for a reason cliche. You've probably heard the phrase, everything happens for a reason. While it's true that God is sovereign and works through all things, this phrase is often used in a shallow way. A family loses a loved one in a tragic accident, and someone says, everything happens for a reason. A person gets diagnosed with cancer, and a friend quotes Romans 8:28, implying that suffering will all make sense soon. But here's the thing, not everything that happens is good from a human perspective. Evil, suffering, and tragedy exist. Trying to force a silver lining onto every hardship isn't helpful and isn't what Paul was saying in this verse. So what was Paul saying? To understand Romans 8:28 correctly, we need to look at the verses surrounding it, especially verse 29, which says, "For those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters." This verse tells us what the good in Romans 8:28 actually is, being conformed to the image of Christ. In other words, God is using everything, our joys, our struggles, our pain, to shape us spiritually and make us more like Jesus. So instead of promising that every hardship will turn into earthly success, Romans 8:28 assures us that God is using all things, even suffering, to accomplish his greater purpose in us. The good is spiritual growth, not earthly comfort. The good that God is working toward isn't always material success, an easier life, or a quick resolution to our problems. It's about making us more like Christ. That means instead of guaranteeing a better job after losing one, God might use the hardship to teach us dependence on him. Instead of promising a new relationship after a breakup, God may use that pain to develop our patience and trust in his plan. Instead of explaining why suffering happens, God may use suffering to strengthen our faith, refine our character, or draw us closer to him. Secondly, God's plan is bigger than our present circumstances. We often view good from a short term earthly perspective happiness, success, stability, but God's definition of good is eternal. Sometimes that means enduring suffering in this life in order to develop qualities like perseverance, humility, and faith. Look at the early Christians. Many of them faced persecution, imprisonment, and even death. If Romans 8:28 meant that everything would work out in this life, then we'd have to believe those believers were abandoned by God. But in reality, they were being shaped for eternity. The same is true for us. Some struggles won't make sense from a human perspective, but God is still at work, even when we don't see the outcome. So, why does all this matter? Understanding this verse correctly is crucial for our faith, and here's why. It protects us from disillusionment. If we expect that every hardship will turn into a worldly blessing, we set ourselves up for disappointment. When things don't improve, people can begin to question God's goodness. But when we understand that God's goal is spiritual transformation, we can trust Him even when life is hard. It helps us endure suffering with hope. Life isn't easy and suffering is real, but Romans 8:28 assures us that God is not wasting our pain. Even when we don't understand why things happen, we can trust that He is using every moment to shape us for eternity. And lastly, it shifts our focus to the eternal. Instead of viewing life as a series of ups and downs, where we hope everything works out in our favor, we begin to see our struggles as opportunities for growth. God's greatest work in us isn't about fixing our circumstances, it's about fixing our hearts. So the next time someone quotes Romans 8:28 as a promise that everything will turn out great, gently remind them of the full picture. God's definition of good isn't about temporary comfort, it's about eternal transformation. Thanks for joining me today. I really hope that you found this helpful and edifying. As a reminder, remember, context matters. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy the show, please give us a positive review to help continue to spread God's word. If you have any Bible questions and you would like to have them answered, please feel free to contact us on our chapelgrovechurch.com website. We also have a Facebook and an Instagram, so feel free to reach out, just send us a message. And until next time, we'll see you later. Have a good day.